Right, our final speaker today is Sam Gibbs from Reading. He's in 4th year of a PhD with Adrian Bell.
And Elizabeth Matthew, who's at the back there.
He's carrying on the Reading, Southampton and Hull School tradition of military service prosopography, essentially compiling large data sets to look at military communities. And in this case, you've compiled one of the muster rolls and the poll taxes, isn't it? And today he's going to talk about who were they, English archers, a regional comparison of socio-economic status and service obligations. So,
thank you very much. So yes, firstly, apologies for my delay in arriving. For some reason, it took 3 hours to get here from Reading, which I can't quite correctly explain. The second apology is just there are a fair few graphs on the slides, but I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. And thank you for coming. I realise there's good competition in the other session, as well as a very interesting test match that's hopefully England will win. But anyway, as Craig said, today I'm looking at the English archers in the second half of the 14th century and their relationships to their retinue captains, and looking at service obligation, so whether archers were serving of their own free will or whether they were encouraged to serve with local landlords, landholders, who might be able to exercise a certain amount of obligation as to their services. I'm also looking at different regions today and how that might affect military service, i.e. the type of service they're undertaking and the location in which they are going to do the service, which I'll get to later. Firstly, I just want to do some of the background to the chapter and the overall thesis. As was said, I'm in my final year. I'm currently writing up. So it's, yes, I'm sure many of you are aware of how much fun that situation is. So much coffee. I'm going to quickly go through some of the background, just in case people aren't quite familiar with some of the sources I've used. The and why question, I'm not sure anymore. And then go through the regional survey, which is the actual results that I want to present today. So one of the main sources I'm using, there's two principal sources, the poll tax returns of 1377, 79 and 1381. Now I've only used the nominal returns, so where there's actually lists of names, and I've taken these from Fenwick's transcribed volumes, not the originals themselves. That's just an example of some of the different types you can have. Now, there are quite a lot of names in this, and unfortunately I had to manually type them in. There's 364,350 entries in the database just from the poll tax. That's not covering any of the muster information, which did take a while. And this was just due to some of the differences between the different returns. So these three columns are all from Essex, but for different places. And you can just see the level of variation between the three. For example, if you look at how wives are recorded, in the first column you've just got an ux next to the name. In the middle column you've got it below the husband, and in the end you've got the wives' first names recorded below as well. So unfortunately, I couldn't just scan them into Excel and do it that way. It took even longer. The muster rolls, many of you will be very familiar with these. Most of the musters that I've taken are included in the soldier database of Adrian and Anne's, which Adrian was very kind to give me a copy of the underlying data, which I could then play around with. I have expanded the data set slightly. I've gone further back in the 14th century to 1350. There's not that many in that period from 1350 to 1369, just a few here and there. And a picture that I took at the National Archives of a muster roll for William de Windsor when he went to Ireland under Lionel of Clarence in 1363. Yes, 1363. As you can see, you've got the knights grouped at the top there, and the men-at-arms in a big group below them. And it was a nice sharp picture, so I thought I'd put that one up. The final source that I'm using for the database is the Inquisition's post-mortem. Now, I'm not using this in the same way. I'm not extracting large quantities of nominal data from it. What I've done is I've used these as a record of land holding. So I've taken the retinue captains that are recorded in muster rolls and looked for them in the Inquisition post-mortem, looked for lands that they hold of the king, or potentially of someone else, because occasionally that is mentioned, or they've inherited from someone if their particular IPM is missing. Now, a person could potentially have IPMs from all over the country, which meant I had to go through them all again by hand, to look for different locations within the counties that I'm particularly looking at. And that's just a picture of one of the calendar ones. Again, I was using the transcribed calendars rather than the original documents to look at them. Okay, using prosopographical approaches, looking at to link the different names between the different sources and also within a source to try and trace military careers. And I built a nice database which looks something like that. If anyone wants to discuss relational databasing, I'm quite happy to do that, but probably after the talk rather than boring everyone else to sleep. So there we are. So today, what I actually want to introduce today is the idea of something I've started referring to as a military service market for archers. Were they able to offer their services to different captains? Could they move around the country to an extent, trying to find opportunities to serve, even if they're not looking necessarily for improved rates of pay or bonuses and so on? The rates of pay in the latter 14th century seem to have been fairly stable, although there are some variations with regards, which are effectively a kind of signing bonus, but that was usually paid to the captain rather than the archers. So terms of service aren't particularly wide, but opportunities for service could vary a lot between different areas of the country. As I said earlier, I also want to look at regional variations, so where they're serving and how they're serving, and seeing if that changes depending on which county, which region of England they stem from or come from. To do this, then, I broke England down into 8 different regions. I got to do some wonderful colouring in, which was nice. And you can see there the 8 counties I've selected. You've got Westmoreland, the East Riding of Yorkshire, just because Yorkshire was so huge, I couldn't face doing all of it. Northamptonshire, Essex, Sussex, Oxfordshire, Dorset and Shropshire. And I chose these just by looking at what the average number of poll tax, nominal poll tax records was for each region and picking the county that was closest to the average. It also gave me a nice balance between inland counties and coastal counties. So there's 4 of each there, which I'll come to later as something that has made a difference to some of the results. And on the whole, the counties are quite disparate, but something that I need to look into a little bit more before I write it up is the Oxfordshire, Northamptonshire, and see if there's any similarities, because I put them in different regions, but obviously they're bordering counties. So I need to have a look at that and consider if there are any differences, similarities, and so on. I had to extract different samples for this. So on the left-hand side of the screen, as you look at it, you've got the poll tax data and the muster roll data there. And then I've taken different samples. So the poll tax has been split into the different counties, the 8 counties that I'm looking at. And from there, I've also identified the captain's land holdings using the IPMs. The muster rolls, I've had to extract the archers. I'm not interested in the men-at-arms, just the archers for the moment. And I've restricted it to 10 years either side of the poll tax, just to help improve the nominal linkage. The further we get away from the dates of the poll tax, the more tenuous any links are, and the chances of a false positive rise. And then obviously I've had to bring in the captain's retinues from that particular sample. For some of the content, I've identified retinues outside of that particular period, going up to 1417. So the muster rolls, before I get to that, they were split into, that muster roll sample of archers was split into 3 different tiers. Tier 1, which were 10,450 unique names that only appear once in that sample. Tier 2 was 1,873 names, which have been repeated multiple times within the same year, thereby suggesting that I'm not going to be able to distinguish those men because there's 2 people serving in the same year. How am I going to differentiate between them? Tier 3 is slightly different. These are names, there's 1,015 names. They repeat, but they repeat in different years, which leaves open the possibility that they are careerists. They're men that are serving on multiple occasions. Now, obviously, that can't be certain just by looking at the repetition of names, but it is an indication. And this gave a total of 18,485 service records. The poll tax, then, which is what this table is for, was split in a similar way, only into 2 sections. Section 1, which are the unique names that appear in that county, so no repetition there. And section 2, which are the names which are repeated within a county. which aren't particularly helpful because the poll tax, theoretically, you were only liable for it in one location. You didn't have to pay it around in different areas, which means if there is a repeat, it means there is more than one person. And I can't use them for any particularly strong linkage between them and any other names. And then there's just a nice little picture to show the links and how I've categorised them. So you've got the unique names in section 1 of the poll tax and tier 1 of the muster rolls. Links between those are relatively strong, all the way down to the links between section 2 and tier 2, which are the multiple incidences of names, which for the purposes of this particular chapter aren't of much use at all. Okay. So moving into some results then. Now the matches in this table are between section 1 of each county's poll tax and tier 1 of the names within retinues of captains. Now to do this I needed to identify captains' retinues and all the men within those, and then look at all the men who were resident in landholdings of retinue captains. So I identified vills who could be tied to a certain captain, and then looking at the soldiers and the people resident within those, and trying to link them to see if we can find any matches. Now the rates of match do vary quite a lot. The column here, which is showing the percentage of matches between the archers, or it's the average of the captain's retinues for each county, how many of the archers match to the poll tax in their land holdings. And they're on the whole very low. There's none above 5%. I then expanded that and looked at the county-wide, so comparing captain's retinues for, say, Dorset, so any captain who had lands in Dorset, and comparing them to the whole of the Dorset poll tax. Again, just looking at men, because there are no women recorded in the muster rolls. And just to give you more of an idea of how that looks, there's a graph for you, so it makes it a bit easier to actually read. So you can see quite there clearly the blue results are the ones which are matched to land holdings and the red ones matched to county-wide. And obviously we would expect to see a large spike in matches to county-wide, even though we're still restricted to that section 1, the unique names, just because there are more names to match to. But the rates of match county-wide are much higher than the rates to matches in specific land holdings. Now, on its own, that's mildly interesting, but there's no real context for that because we can't be sure if there's this military service market until we've looked if archers are serving other people, if they're serving elsewhere. Because if that was a 0% match, then obviously we'd have to say, well, there's very little opportunities for them outside of their particular locality. So this table is, again, looking at these 8 counties, and we're looking at matches between the Section 1 and Tier 1 archers to see if we can identify them serving in retinues, if we can see retinues for a certain county, for example, again, Dorset, so archers who are in retinues from Dorset captains being identified in the poll tax from outside of the county. I've looked at this so many different ways that sometimes I get lost in my own tables and Excel charts. It's horrible. So yes, this is looking at the archers, for example, from Dorset retinues, but looking for them in the poll taxes outside of that county. Now the good links are the ones where there's a 1-to-1 match. I can find one person in a Dorset retinue and one person matching them in the entire country outside of that. And the possible links are where I've got one person in a retinue matched to many people outside of the county. So not particularly strong, but the 1-to-1, the good links, are a reasonable thing to work with. As you can see, the numbers where there's no match at all are much, much higher than anywhere else, than the other two categories. And that boils down to, these are the good links. You can see the percentage rates through there, which then, bringing it back to that other graph I put up earlier, you've got the matches outside the county is the blue, and the matches within a county in the red. You have to remember for this particular table also you've got matches within a captain's land holdings to take into account, which are much, much smaller. They're on the whole below that 2% line. So we can see that from that, although you are more likely to find them matched within their own county, you're therefore more likely to find them outside the county than you are directly within the land holdings of a retinue captain. Which to an extent makes some kind of sense. If communication isn't great, if someone was recruiting, you'd be more likely to get the news locally than you would from far away. So again, coming back to Dorset, I'm more likely to find out about someone who's recruiting in my area, in my county, than I would be if they're recruiting up in Yorkshire. And even then, would I bother making the journey? Because that's a heck of a long way to travel. So these are some of the first results. They are suggesting that there is this possibility that archers were not necessarily tied into serving people who could influence them through tenurial obligation. Instead, they are able to an extent, move away from that and serve other people when maybe they wanted to, or just when there was an opportunity to do so. You have got a couple of unusual ones, Dorset and Westmoreland on that particular graph, who appear to have more serving outside the county than within. That is possibly due in Westmoreland's case due to the very small surviving poll tax returns. But beyond that, I can't at the moment give you any further suggestions as to why that might be. So that kind of deals with the who are they serving. Moving on then to the what are they doing. Now the soldier database already had this split in different types of service, different musters doing what are they doing, whether it's expeditionary, garrison, standing armies, escort, naval, or we're not quite sure. Now drawing a line between these different types can be a little bit tricky. Obviously expeditionary armies to France, it's going to involve some ships. Because otherwise horses can't swim across the channel. At least I don't think they can. Craig? No, horses can't swim that far apparently. So there are some blurring of lines, but I've stuck to their original categories just because they've established those and it helped me to construct a decent framework. So there you've got the archers in that sample from 1367 to 91 and how their individual service records, how they can be categorised in percentage terms of the whole sample. And you can see from that the naval service is the most common, which reflects how the war was going for the English at the time and where their focuses were. From an English perspective, the period from 1369 onwards wasn't particularly successful and did involve an awful lot of naval warfare in comparison to the earlier and later periods. Then what I've done is those archers that I identified within a county, the tier 1, so the archers that only appear once, these are the fairly solid matches, but they're only an archer that's only served once. How do they break down? And again, you can see it follows a similar pattern, although the numbers are noticeably lower in the standing army category and higher in the naval category. And then the tier 3 archers, which are the ones that are serving on more than one occasion. Again, it's almost identical to the tier 1. You've got a slightly higher expeditionary rate there, but the others are very similar, which in itself doesn't suggest there's a massive difference between people serving more than once against those that are only serving on one occasion. And that's something I am investigating further and looking at individual cases of archers in that tier 3, the multiple service men, to see if there can be the ones where we've got a stronger link can be identified as following particular pursuits, whether they specialise in naval service or whether maybe they go more to expeditionary armies to France because that's where the money is. And that's just a breakdown of all the results for you to have a look at. As you can see, the orange lines, which are the naval, are much, much higher than everything else, and all the others are below the 20% line on the whole. Again, Westmoreland is a bit of an outlier, probably due to the small sample size, which is influencing, makes it seem more significant than it actually is. But what we can do with this is split between these coastal and inland counties and look at the rate, in this case, of naval service. You might expect to see higher rates of naval service with counties with large coastlines, just because they would have a group of people who would be more used to working in or with the sea. And there is a slight difference between the rates of coastal and inland service in in the amount of naval service that you can find there. It isn't massive. It's about it's 56% to 62%. But given the actual comparable sample sizes, it is reasonably significant result. And I need to again look further into how different types of service can be reflected between different counties. But I thought that was a particularly interesting observation there. The final group of results I just want to go through today is where they're serving. So again, I've taken the locations from the soldier database and split them between the Archer sample, the Tier 1 for all the counties, and the Tier 3 career soldiers. Again, you can see the results are very similar across the different samples. In these broad categories, you've got the vast majority are serving in France, with Ireland and then Scotland as the runner-ups, if you will, which again reflects the focuses of English, what the English military and what the English Crown was trying to achieve at the time. In this particular period, there was much more focus on France than there was on the rest of the British Isles on the whole. Obviously, you had some expeditions, particularly to Ireland. Lionel of Clarence, who I mentioned earlier, was there on one occasion, but took quite a lot of resources as a son of Edward III. And the various wars and battles with Scotland that flared up every now and again would do that too. Again, a similar graph looking at where they're serving. You can see from that the green lines, which are France, are on the whole much, much higher. The one thing I would draw your attention to, though, is for Westmoreland and Yorkshire. If you look at the orange lines there, which, in case anyone can't see them, are these ones. They're very high for Scotland as well as France. In the case of Westmoreland, in fact, the Scottish is outnumbering the French, which is what this is showing here. Now, this is interesting because, obviously, these are the two northern counties that I've got. And again, you might expect that there is a increased rate of service amongst men from northern counties as to Scotland, just because of the proximity of Scotland to Westmoreland and Yorkshire. And this result does suggest that that is true. Obviously, the Yorkshire, there are more going to France than Scotland. Westmoreland, you've got more in Scotland. But Yorkshire, obviously, being on the east coast, has got relatively easy access down to the south and onwards to France. Westmoreland going down the Irish Sea, not particularly easy. I'm a sailor. Not that I'm a sailor, but I understand it's a not particularly comfortable journey. Whereas coming down from Yorkshire, it is relatively easy. So these are just some of the results that I've been generating as a result of this database. You've got one dealing with where and one dealing with what. And obviously, any conclusions that I do draw are going to be tempered with a kind of yes, but is your nominal linkage secure? Could you look at it in a different way? Could you do this? Could you do that? I think I've approached this in a fairly reasoned way. I haven't gone into all the details of the method behind it and the historiography that I'm basing it on, just because that would send you to sleep. And it's about 15,000 words long. So, but I do think these results do suggest that there are regional variations which can be identified between Archer's service and the pattern of service that can be detected. They're not always pronounced, but they can be seen. And although Archers were serving in retinues led by their landlords or men who have influence within their locality, they can also be found serving landlords who don't seem to have any tenurial obligations over them at all. So almost equally likely, they're comparable levels, which to me at least is suggesting that there was a military service market for Archers, and they did have the opportunities to serve as and when they wanted. Thank you.